Here's a psychological fact that might make your skin crawl. You have a great conversation with a stranger. You enjoy it. You feel good. And within 1 to 2 weeks, your brain begins to forget how pleasant it really was. Soon, you're afraid of socializing all over again. Strange, isn't it? Imagine you're sitting in a coffee shop. A friendly-looking stranger is sitting nearby. You think about saying hello, but you don't. Why? According to psychology, your brain may be making the same mistake millions of people make every day. You tell yourself the conversation might be awkward. Maybe they don't want to be bothered. Maybe you'll run out of things to say. Maybe they'll think you're strange. So you stay silent. The opportunity passes. And just like that, another potential human connection disappears before it even begins. But what if almost all of those assumptions are wrong? What if the biggest obstacle between you and meaningful conversations isn't other people, but your own expectations? For years, psychologists have noticed something fascinating. When people are asked to predict how a conversation with a stranger will go, they tend to be surprisingly pessimistic. They expect awkward silences. They expect discomfort. They expect rejection. But when they actually have the conversation, something very different happens. Again and again, people report enjoying the interaction far more than they expected. The conversation feels easier, more natural, more rewarding. The stranger turns out to be friendlier than imagined. The experience is often not just acceptable, but genuinely enjoyable. So if reality keeps proving our expectations wrong, why don't we learn? Why do we keep making the same mistake? A recent series of psychological studies set out to answer exactly this question. Researchers asked participants to have conversations with strangers. Before the conversations, people predicted how they thought they would feel. Afterward, they reported what the experience was actually like. The result was remarkably consistent. People underestimated how positive the conversations would be. The reality was better than expected. No surprise there. Psychologists have found similar patterns before. But the researchers were interested in something deeper. They wanted to know whether people would finally update their beliefs. Would a positive experience change how they felt about future conversations? At first, the answer appeared to be yes. Immediately after talking with a stranger, participants became more optimistic. They expected future conversations to be more enjoyable. Their predictions became more accurate. For a brief moment, reality seemed to correct their mistaken beliefs. It's exactly what we'd expect. After all, experience is supposed to teach us. Touch a hot stove, and you learn not to touch it again. Try a delicious meal, and you remember you liked it. Positive experiences should make us more optimistic. And for a little while, they did. But then something unexpected happened. The researchers followed up a week later. And then again. The optimism had begun to fade. Within 1 to 2 weeks, many participants had drifted back toward the same pessimistic expectations they held before the conversation ever happened. Think about that for a moment. They had direct evidence that talking to strangers was enjoyable. They had personally experienced it. And yet their brains slowly returned to expecting the worst. It was almost as if the positive conversation had never happened. Why would that happen? Why would we ignore our own experience? Part of the answer seems to lie in memory. The researchers discovered that people didn't remember the conversations exactly as they experienced them. Immediately after talking, participants reported relatively high levels of enjoyment. But when they recalled the interaction later, the memory wasn't quite as positive. The emotional impact had faded. The excitement was weaker. The warmth felt less vivid. The conversation itself hadn't changed. Only the memory had. And because the memory became less positive, the lesson became weaker too. This creates a strange psychological cycle. Before a conversation, we expect discomfort. After the conversation, we feel pleasantly surprised. Then time passes. The positive memory fades. Our pessimism returns. And when another opportunity for connection appears, we hesitate all over again. The cycle repeats itself. Not because strangers are unfriendly. Not because conversations are unpleasant. But because our brains struggle to hold on to the evidence that says otherwise. In many ways, This tendency may have deep evolutionary roots. Human beings are social creatures. For most of human history, belonging to a group was essential for survival. Being rejected carried real risks. As a result, our brains evolved to pay special attention to social threats. Potential embarrassment, potential rejection, potential discomfort. Even today, our minds often focus more on what could go wrong than on what will probably go right. And that's where the problem begins. Because our predictions aren't based entirely on reality. They're influenced by ancient warning systems that were designed to keep us safe. The irony is that these protective instincts often prevent us from experiences that could make us happier. Study after study has shown that social connection is one of the strongest predictors of well-being. Not money, not status, not achievement. Connection, simple conversations, moments of understanding, small interactions that remind us we're not alone. Yet our expectations often push us away from exactly the thing we need most. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. You didn't want to attend a social event. You expected it to be uncomfortable. You considered canceling. But once you arrived, you enjoyed yourself. You met interesting people. You had meaningful conversations. You left feeling glad you went. And then, a few weeks later, another invitation arrived. And somehow, the same doubts returned. The same hesitation. The same anxiety. As if you'd forgotten the lesson from the last time. This research suggests something important. The problem isn't that we don't know conversations can be rewarding. The problem is that we keep forgetting. We forget how often people are kind. We forget how often strangers surprise us. We forget how frequently our fears fail to come true. And because we forget, we continue to approach new social opportunities with unnecessary caution. Has this ever happened to you? You had a great conversation with someone new, but weeks later, you felt that same hesitation again? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how common this is. So the next time you find yourself sitting in a coffee shop, the next time you notice yourself hesitating before a social interaction, remember this. Your expectations may not always be an accurate reflection of reality. They may be influenced by fears, assumptions, and memories that have quietly changed over time. Because one of the most fascinating findings from this research is not that strangers are especially friendly. And it's not that every conversation will be enjoyable. It's that our predictions about social experiences can remain surprisingly pessimistic. Even after reality gives us reasons to think otherwise. We often assume we learn directly from experience. But sometimes experience isn't enough. Sometimes our memories fade. Our emotions change, and old expectations quietly return. Perhaps that's why certain social fears can feel so persistent. Not because they're always true, but because the lessons that challenge them don't always last. And maybe that's the real mystery this research reveals. How easily the mind can return to an old belief, even after reality has suggested something different. If you enjoyed this exploration into psychology and human behavior, consider subscribing for more videos. Thanks for watching.